this moment is, let's just clear the screen, make sure everything is clean. All right. What would you consider to be the biggest problem in our world today that requires the most attention? That's my question to start today. Would you say hunger? Would you say war? Would you say jealousy? Would you say, what would you say?
Climate change.
Climate change, rivalry, unhealthy diet, spiritual insensitivity, no patience. Well, you're not a doctor, you expect to have patience. You know, the doctor's got a lot of patience. I know some doctors have no patience, it's a problem. Okay, so just to get our minds going, let us discuss the final halacha of the Rambam, which was learned on Thursday, Lag BaOmer. That was what I was waiting for. There we go. Live on for all to see. Thank you for the gesund blessings. Okay, so we discussed that Mishnah Torah consists of 14 different books, and the final book is called Shoftim, Judges. And it deals with the laws of the Sanhedrin, testimony, rebelling against the Sanhedrin. It deals with the laws of mourning, and kings and their wars. Apologies. Thank you. There was an old man in my neighborhood when I grew up as a kid, Mr. Shuchat. He used to say, "Tzigezint, darf man haben parnusa ochet." You know what that means? Not enough gesund, he would say. You also need to have some parnasa. Well, in the Chumash portion of this week, Bechukosai, the very beginning, God gives us powerful, beautiful blessings of prosperity, of abundance, of living with all these goodies. And then the verse says, "V'samti shalom ba'artzachem," God promises to give peace upon the land. So Rashi in his commentary says on that, without shalom, without peace, there's gornisht. You could be a multi-billionaire, but when there's no peace, maybe you could say if there's no health, the same thing. What are all the blessings worth? A multi-billionaire has everything in the world, but it doesn't have health. It's health to be a toite bankes. Yeah? It's a promise when we heed God's commandments. Doesn't say it's stipulated when Mashiach comes. That doesn't say in the verse.
For starters, there's no peace in Israel.
Yes.
There's no peace in Ukraine. There's no peace in America.
Well, maybe if we read the verse that promises the peace, maybe we would get it. So, we're not connected. We're still not connected. I apologize. Why is it not? Sorry, everyone. Just got to get the screen here back on.
The Israelis want peace forever. I want a piece of Egypt, a piece of Jordan, a piece of Syria.
I'm not so sure about that. I think it's the other way around. That they want pieces of us.
Yeah.
Anyways, we won't go into that now. All right. So let's look at the final halacha of Rambam, since we talk about all the different things that we want in the world. And so, as I mentioned, Mishnah Torah consists of 14 different books. And the final book, as we said, is the book of Shoftim, the book of Judges, that deals with the laws of the Sanhedrin and kings and wars, since you mentioned that as well. And Rambam explains in his introduction that he placed the laws of mourning following the laws of the Sanhedrin. Very interesting that our course that we've interrupted, Journey of the Soul, deals with the laws of mourning. And why he puts this right here, he says, even though it doesn't come to like what Are we back on? Ladies and gents, it looks like we're still on YouTube, so you guys are there, but we were kicked off. I guess the internet must have come off. So give me a moment that I'll put everything back on, and then we'll resume. Can everyone see? Screen is on. All right, so we said there are 14 books. I have to know where we were holding before we were interrupted. 14 books, and the conclusion is the book of Judges. So the final 2 chapters of the final section addresses a fundamental topic in Judaism, one of the 13 principles of Jewish faith as is formulated by the Rambam. 13 principles of Jewish faith. We had questions about that, and what you asked a moment ago about Mashiach is addressed right here, and Rambam chose to end with this because it is only during the era of redemption, during the time of Mashiach, when all of the many halachas described in the Mishnah Torah will actually be implemented. Good morning, Boker Tov. Good to see you, Aubrey. So this is all part of it. Now, throughout history, even in the darkest times, Jews did not give up hope for a different world, for a better world. Even on their way to the death camps, there were Jews who sang Ani Mamin, that we believe with perfect faith. It's part of the 13 principles of faith. Ani Mamin, Ani Mamin, Ani Mamin. I believe with perfect faith. Be'emunah shelema, bevias HaMashiach, bevias HaMashiach, Ani Mamin. So you know this song? And it was actually a beautiful, fascinating story about how this song was composed. Maybe I can use it. I could show you a video about it just now, if you want to know about that. The point I'm making is that no matter how divorced from the current experience this future of Mashiach was, Jews regarded the reality as, perhaps call it a bad nightmare, from which society would eventually awaken. And Jews never accepted that violence and greed, and what did we wake up to this morning? Shootings in Texas. Amazing that the country that is supposed to be like the great luminary of the world has the most violent crimes, unless it just goes unreported in other countries. But, pardon? The U.S. has about 300 million. Yeah. But the point I'm saying is, we never accepted that violence was the way of life, that's the way it should be. And the truth is, you might say, most people in the world are living good, peaceful, good lives. Violence makes it to the headlines. Why? Because as they say, if it bleeds, it leads. It's the abnormal that makes it into the headlines, not the normal activities. Right? This is normal, that we should get together and enjoy each other's company in a pleasant, beautiful manner and learning Torah together. So we always believed that the arc of the universe bends towards a better, a gentler reality that's based on morality, that's based on kindness, on goodness, on holiness. That's what we believe in. And this is what Rambam emphasizes in his conclusion of all of his teachings, that future is upon us. And in the final halacha, which is the final halacha of all the Mishnah Torah, Rambam summarizes many of the prophecies that are found throughout Tanakh, through the Jewish scriptures, that describe what the world will look like during that era. And in fact, I think maybe I could take a moment and share with you a link I have of the Rebbe making that siyum himself. We could spend just a few minutes watching the Rebbe conclude the Rambam. So I'm just going to put this all on pause for a moment. Okay, so just hang in there.
הלוך אחרינו הפסוכון, ובייסי הזמן, ודוס קום בהמשך zu der Friedeke הלוכה. Also das Mann, wo das Jemes HaMashiach lehiye schon, leirov, leimilchome, nicht kein Hunger und nicht kein Milchomes. Leikina besachlus wird nicht sein, kein Kino und Strachlus zwischen sich. Und sagt auf der Ufeche Tatam, שהטבע מתעשין בתחילוסה, das הנוסח von Atam, ודפר was die טבע, was sie dämmelt sein. wird sein מושפע הרבה, wird sein הסך טבע, in die Tobe Pashtus kein Siebe, soll sein Kino, Allahs kama wie kama, sie kann nicht sein kein Roh, wie bald am Hot Teva Harbe.
That was the Siyum, as it was conducted by the Rebbe in 1985, the completion of the Rambam study cycle. And what I'll do now is I'm going to put on the screen the actual text of that last chapter of Rambam, the Laws of Kings. So before we do that, I'll just show you all the laws that all the books. There's 14 books called Yada Chazaka, and you can see all the books here. Let me go back a moment. I'll go to a previous slide so I could put all the books on here for you, and you could just see what everything is. All right, can you see? Is the screen clear enough for everyone to see? Starting from the bottom, book 1 is the book Sefer Mada, the book of knowledge, and that's the laws of basic principles of Judaism. Book 2, Sefer Ahava, the book of love, and that deals with laws that inspire a love for God, such as prayer and mezuzah and things like that. Next book, book 3, Sefer Zmanim, the book of times, and this is a book that deals with, what do you think, Zmanim, what types of times? Shabbos, Chagim, exactly, holidays. Book 4, Sefer Nashim, the book of woman. Shit, there's a wild little fly here driving me crazy. What's the book of woman? Okay, it deals with laws of marriage and divorce. The next is the book of holiness, Kachim, and that deals with forbidden marital relations and kosher food. So it's interesting what it includes. Let's go to the next set. Here we go. Book 6. Book 6 is the book of promises, deals with oaths and vows. The next book is the book of Zraim, seeds, and that deals with laws pertaining to agriculture. Book 8, the book of service, Avoda. What do you think that deals with? Yes, the service of the temple and the sacrifices that were offered there, the public sacrifices. Then we have the next book, which is also dealing with sacrifices, Karbanas, but that deals with the sacrifices of individual, whereas the previous book dealt with the public ones. Then you have book 10, which is ritual purity, laws of ritual purity and impurity, which today doesn't really apply, but in times of the temple were very relevant. Then you have book 11, that's injuries pertaining to various injuries in Jewish law, tort laws. Then you have the book of acquisitions. Okay, here it deals with sale and purchase and protection and all these types of laws from the Jewish perspective. Book 13 is a book of judgments, laws of civil matters. And finally, book 14, which we're going to conclude right now, and that is Shoftim, dealing with judges. But as I mentioned, it's not just courts and kings, monarchy, but also we'll tap into the future era of redemption. So let me just read the final law to you as you can see it on the screen. It says as follows: in the future era, the era of Mashiach, there will be neither famine nor war, neither envy nor rivalry, because what's good will flow in abundance. Kol ma'adanim mitzuyim ka'afar will be, all the delights will be freely available as the dust of the earth. And it says, what will be the occupation of the entire universe? The whole world will be solely engaged to know Hashem. Oh, it's not even on the screen. Sorry. There we go. Whoops. There we are. Can you see? Therefore, says the Rambam, the Jews will be great sages and know the hidden matters, grasping the knowledge of their Creator according to the full extent of human potential. As it says, the prophet Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 9, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the ocean bed. Umala ha'aretz deya es Hashem. Whole world will be filled with knowing God as the waters, kamayim layam mechasim, like the waters cover the seabed. In fact, there's a beautiful Chabad niggun for that. Umala ha'aretz deya es Hashem, kamayim layam mechasim. Okay, I will go into a different profession. Sorry. Umalaretz deyes Hashem kamayim layam mechasim. 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 So, does this sound very fantastical? Is it something you're looking forward to? Is there a connection between the physical and the spiritual changes of the world? Because notice he talks about a lot of physical delights that are going to be and the spiritual transformation the world will experience. And of course, once we gain the consciousness of God, then certainly the negatives of existence will vanish. Because once you are conscientious and aware of divinity, of what God wants from you, then you won't do those negative behaviors. No, not when Mashiach comes, according to what Rambam says. It says the whole world will be devoid of crime. He's not denying that, but he's saying it will be a completely good world. It will be a completely transformed world. I think everyone agrees to that. Because why is there discord today? Why do we have fighting and war and all the problems of the world? Mashiach hasn't yet come, right? Why are there relationship issues? Why is there poverty and hunger, which Rambam says will be gone when Mashiach comes? Most problems in the world come from a zero-sum game perspective, where it is me versus you, us versus them. All these issues will vanish the second every being in existence realizes that it is one piece of a larger puzzle, and that the other person, or another nation, or thing is a vital burst of divine energy that complements everything and that serves as a platform through which God wishes to express himself. So I no longer see you or another as a competition to me. We're all in it together. You know the story about the fellow on the boat who bought a seat on a cruise, paid big bucks for his nice private cabin, and he starts drilling a hole. So the other passengers say, hey, you Michiganer, what do we need a Titanic with an iceberg? We got you on here. You're going to cause us all to drown. The boat will capsize. He says, listen, I paid full price for my cabin. I could do what I want. You could do what you want. We're all in this boat together. And that's the same thing we have to realize. We're all in this world together. We're all with each other. The redemption, as Maimonides describes it here in the last chapter, you said it's a fuzzy thing before. It sounds vague. It sounds abstract. It sounds utopian. We try to live in the present. Right? We're used to the present. We're in our comfort zones. We see things the way we're used to them. It's difficult to imagine a very different future. How's it possible? Nonsense. By the way, speaking of Ukraine, in Kharkov, the city where my cousin lives, the main rabbi just returned from New York. He was in New York a few days ago and just went back to Kharkov. Posted pictures. The city looks schrecklich. Bombed out. Even the shul has sustained some damages, but it looks good. And he's back. There's a story I wanted to tell you of Hasidim who were sitting at a Farbrengen with Reb Hillel Paritcher, renowned Hasidic teacher. And the wine on the table eventually finished. So what happened? One of the guests volunteered that he's going to go down into the cellar and he was going to retrieve a new supply, go get another bottle. What happens? He goes down, and on the way down, he sees, oh, it's so dark, it's tunkel, schrecklich, I can't see anything. What do I do? You know, he's overwhelmed with the darkness. So he starts screaming out, it's so dark, you know, I can't find my way. Maybe somebody bring a candle. So one of the other guys sitting at the table yells back to him, he says, don't worry, wait a few seconds, and your eyes will get used to the darkness. Oh, that's a teaching moment, because you know what? The rabbi turned around and said to everybody else, this is a lesson about life. He says, this is the problem we all have, is our endurance, not our endurance, our immunization, our getting used to, right? We get used to the darkness, we become comfortable with it, and we think this is normal, this is the way it ought to be. Don't get stuck in that comfort zone of whatever it might be. People get stuck in the comfort of poverty, of sickness, of pain, of suffering. I was sitting in the dentist chair yesterday. I wanted to ask him. When he first put these braces on me, it was so painful, it was unbearable. I just want to know now, did I get used to the pain, or did the pain go away? I don't know. Or did the pain get used to me? According to the Jewish way of thinking, we are currently living in that dark cellar. And there are abundant blessings in the cellar, no doubt. If we open our eyes, we'll see there's plenty of good, both physical good and spiritual good in the life we live. There's no doubt about it. And like I always say, focus on the positive. Reminding us of the professor who put up the white chart in front of the classroom and put a black dot on it with his marker and asked all the students, what do you see? And everybody's focused on the black dot. He said, hold on a second. There's so much white around. Why do you only see the black dot? The news focuses on all the tragedies and travesties and crime and corruption and all the problems that exist. But there's so much good. If we even look at our own lives, that I tell you, I saw a letter from the Rebbe where I don't see the other person's full letter correspondence. I can only see the Rebbe's response. But I gathered that this person, he writes there, you write that you want to that you want to move into a bigger house because your current house can't fit your big, large family. And he says, firstly, I'm very glad that you have a beautiful big family and that you found a wonderful wife and you have the blessing of all these children and that you own a home, because there's many single people out there who are still looking for the basharts, and there are many married couples who are still struggling with fertility and can't have children, and there are many sizable families who can't afford to buy a house and are still renting and struggling with the payments. All right, so the Rebbe turned this man's letter around, and he says, let's for a moment just first focus on the blessings. Have you got blessings in your life? Okay, now that we have the blessings, thank God for that, and please God, you'll find a solution to your current struggle, to your current predicament and challenge. We have to see there's plenty of blessings here. But we also know, like this person knows, thank God I got these blessings, but I need a bigger house. Or like the guy in the cellar looking for the wine. It's dark down here. Compared to what's possible, we are far from the ideal. Right? The crisis that we're currently living through, whatever it might be, whether we're still not out of COVID, or there's monkeypox, or there's war in Ukraine, and the current economy and load shedding, and right, you want to focus on problems? There's plenty of problems out there. The problem is that we're used to the current reality. How much I heard people say this. Just get used to it. There's going to be load shedding for the next 10 years. It ain't going away. We had it for the last 12 years already. It's not going anywhere. Just get used to it and move on. Right? This may make it challenging to connect to the concept of a future that's better. Because if we say get used to load shedding and that's it, then maybe ESCOM has a good excuse to have an alibi. Get used to it. That's life. And what Rambam's telling us here is that don't get used to it, because there's a much better future that's out there. And that's a better future that we need to look forward to. Right? So if we look at the progress, if we want to focus on the good, there's so much good that's already happened. So much good that's happening in the world around us. And then we can have easier time actually connecting to this concept.
But I don't think one should stop there. You should still look for better.
Oh, of course. If good is, there's a Yiddish expression, as gut is besser, nicht besser. You know what that means? If good is better, isn't better. So yes, we have a vaccine for COVID. There are still people dying from it. The COVID deaths, even in our own community. I just heard about somebody who passed away this week from COVID. Was on a holiday last week in Cape Town, came back with COVID and did not survive. I just heard this in the dentist's office yesterday. It is still there, still rife. We still have problems. But let's focus on the good. 2 years ago, there wasn't yet a inoculation for it. Now we have a vaccine. Think about the war in Ukraine. Think about all the problems. There's solutions. There's progress. Things are getting better.
But you can't close your eyes to the existing reality.
True. So I focused on the existent reality. Now I want to flip. Not just hope. Open your eyes and
It's going to happen.
no. Look around and see how much has progressed in the last year, in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years.
But acknowledge what has actually happened.
We did that a minute ago. We just acknowledged it.
The bad is there, you know.
We acknowledged that. Now I want to flip it. Now I want to say, besides for the bad, there's also lots of good. Look at the wall. Look at the picture in front of you. Huh?
One walk down this ghost
We haven't.
horses.
Hold on a second. Did I acknowledge the negative?
Yeah.
So, thank you. Now, we're moving on to the positive.
You've got to be hopeful. You've got to.
That's exactly my point.
You've got to.
We acknowledged the bad. Now we're going on to the good.
You can't just sit and hope.
I don't know. I want to
You
hear
can't
the
just
rabbi.
mope.
And
You
I
see,
can
this is the
see
two
him
sides
now,
of the coin.
can't you?
I say you can't just mope, and you say you can't just hope. That's right. You got to do something about it.
See what you can do.
Because if it bleeds, it leads. That's the way they make their money on.
I don't know. Even yesterday you were saying that you must ask for
No, they're reporting news. They're reporting reality. I'm not saying that the negative doesn't exist. In fact, I just spoke about all the negative, right? I just took 10 minutes of your time to tell you what you know about all the negative. Now it looks like I have to work a little bit harder in telling you about the positive. You don't want to hear it. So let's look at the positive. This is a wall in New York City. Anyone ever seen this wall? This wall is part of the United Nations compound, okay? And it has a quote from Isaiah. What does it say on this wall? Can you read it? Pardon? That too, but look at this wall. It says, they shall beat their swords into plowshares. Okay, it's prominently engraved on the Isaiah wall, which is right by the headquarters of the UN building in New York. Built in 1948. And the Rebbe spoke about it back then. And he said that he expounded on the idea how the Gentile world is grasping this, the idea of the United Nations, of people coming together. It was the year that Israel was refounded. So, and in recent years, the UN, along with many different organizations and other charities, right, such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they have taken on the goal of eradicating poverty worldwide. The very fact that people are talking about eradicating war and poverty, even though it hasn't materialized yet, it's hopeful, not just hopeful. These people are doing something about it. That's revolutionary. That hasn't happened in the past. Now, it's true that there's still plenty of problems. I'm not negating and denying the problems. We discussed it quite a bit. But we have to also look at the positive. We have to see how much progress is being made. And even as these goals have not yet fully been attained, has progress been initiated, started, have things moved along? You know, back in the days of our prophets, when they spoke about these things, when conquest was regarded as the natural right of the mighty. You could conquer whoever, take whoever you want. Hunger was the expected plight of humanity, that you be hungry. And the truth is, there's a solution. I'll tell you about it in a moment, because there was a lady in New York. I'll tell you about it in a moment. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, to illustrate your point. Some it might be frivolous, but I think it's very important. Changing weapons into plowshares. War negativity into something positive.
Yeah.
There is an artist who lives in Connecticut who goes around collecting pieces of the rockets. And he converts them into the most amazing jewelry and Jewish artifacts.
Yeah.
And all sorts of things. That is a classic turning weapons into plowshares.
Absolutely.
And something to give us hope.
Certainly. So, while you can't mope, you certainly can't just hope, and that's why these people are doing something about it. Yeah.
Careful the widow, the orphan, the poor, etc. But it says that there will always be the. It's a mitzvah that we've got to look after.
Not when Mashiach comes. That's what Rambam's telling us here. There won't be poor anymore.
But the Torah says there will always be.
No, the Torah doesn't say that. Show me a verse in the Torah where it says there will always be poor. It doesn't say it anywhere. No, there's no such verse.
There is a verse at the time. There will be poor in the world. And we have got a duty to look after.
The Torah says you have a duty to look after the poor. It doesn't say that there forever will be poor. This is the idea of Mashiach, is a time when there will be no more. Does it say people will always be sick? No.
People won't be sick.
No, people won't be sick.
But people will die.
No, people won't die. There will be no more death. There will be, we even say it at every funeral. You who likes Chazana, so you're just saying words. It's not just words, my friends.
I cannot even, I'm here for Mashiach.
That's why you're here, to learn about this. Resurrection is a basic tenet of Jewish faith.
You say no more death.
Yeah.
Birth?
Birth, yes. Death, no. Hospitals will be just for birthing, just for birth. There's plenty of space in this world that's unoccupied. Still. The same Almighty God who created it all. You don't think the same God has got some solutions?
You say about the dry bones in the palace. And I heard riding through to Jerusalem and the earth and the whole story. But there are going to be 4 or 5 bodies that will never ever Hashem will not bring them.
Who?
And that's it. It was not deserving of.
Well, the point is,
No matter, I mean, the Rosh, how bad you got to be not deserving of.
yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is to look at the positive, that like Miriam just mentioned, and as you could all see constantly, look how much science has advanced. Look how much technology has become so much more available these days. There's so much, life is so much better today than it was a decade ago, than it was a century ago. There's so much improvement in the world. We just have to look around, right? It's no longer, is it the norm to have to work long, back-breaking hours in the field as it once was, to sit in a factory. Even factories have been taken over today by automation. Workshops, so much of that is gone. You don't have to work as rigorously as one did it in the past to put bread on the table for your family. So I don't want to minimize the pressures of today's workplace. It's true that people do have to work hard. And I do work hard. But it pales in comparison to what was the norm for my father, for my parents.
Yeah.
Physically, the world's a far easier place to live in.
Absolutely.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
a question. Even food is being genetically and scientifically modified so that it will be quickly and more available to feed more people.
So you see the advancement of medicine. You see how it's changing lives. Is this not sounding utopian? Does that not sound like we're getting closer to the era of Mashiach? The hours that you work today are much less than people did in the past. People have more holiday vacation time.
Israel's looking to make a longer weekend.
There you go. And the average lifespan,
France is trying to make a 4-day working week.
for real, South Africa has it already.
Now the 1 day.
You know, I go to a certain doctor, a person, I can't give away all the information. Anyways, he only works, he sees patients Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Again, Fridays are half a day. Okay, he keeps Shabbos, so Shabbos is already out. Sundays off. Wednesdays is golf day. So he sees patients Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and a half day Friday. So he has a 3.5 day work week, this particular professional. Right?
What a professionals.
How do you like that? And he travels quite a bit. And then when he's off for 10 days to Israel and 10 days to here and 10 days to there, look how many days a week he works. It sounds like the medical aids pay quite decently. Or he has a Yerusha somewhere.
No, he charges.
The point I'm making is, look at how things are so much better today than they were before. A century ago, finding a job required that you had to work on Shabbos. Look at the cars we drive. Look at the technology we use. Right? Yeah?
You're telling us about all the good things which are coming about now. The coming of Mashiach. You don't think that's also going to be, or is already a gradual happening?
Certainly there's a gradual element of the world becoming better, and there's no doubt that that's part of just like, our sages compare the millennia of the world according to Jewish tradition. We're now in the year 5782, right? So there are 6 days of the week. Friday is the day coming into Shabbos. So the first millennia would be Sunday. Second millennia corresponding to Monday. We are now holding late Friday afternoon. On Friday afternoon, in your home, you are very close to Shabbos, right? Your food is prepared. The house already has a delicious aroma. The table's getting set. We're now very close to the era of Yom Shekulai Shabbos, that is eternal Shabbos for the world.
We've got to start getting ready.
Yes, of course you got to get starting ready. But the point I'm making, who just asked that, Maya, that today's world of all the advancement certainly is reflective of a world that's ready for Mashiach, that's getting there. So it's not Shabbos yet. Mashiach hasn't come yet. But no doubt the world is feeling already the advancement. And when did this all start? Probably in the last 200 years, the advancement of science and the Industrial Revolution, and all that is in the last 200 years, which you could say is when we're in that late Friday afternoon period, symbolically.
Rabbi?
Yeah? How much have I aged in the last 10 years? I'm teaching Chabad Seniors Club for 13 years already. I'm going great. I can't see it in the video. Bar mitzvah celebration. Yes.
Rabbi,
The age of Mashiach will last for 1,000 years and there will be something else.
into the chat.
Eternal.
Covenant will be forever.
Yeah.
So was my previous information wrong?
I don't know. Maybe there's different perspectives and opinions. You know what I say in davening every day? V'niske, v'nichya, v'nireh. Right? What does it mean? If we will be privileged, we will merit, and we will see, and we will experience, and then we'll know. So everything I tell you right now, and everything you read or heard, it's ideas. Has it happened yet? No. Let's find out when it happens. Nothing that I'm telling you here take from me as my information. I didn't make this stuff up, okay? I'm sharing with you what our sages tell us. And when it happens, then you'll find out and experience it. You want to be there when it, you'll be there. I guarantee you. There you go. It's in your name.
Even food is being genetically modified.
Well, right now, gradually, but I think you'll know when Mashiach comes. You'll really know. They tell a story about a great sage living in Israel some 200 years ago, and that there was a Meshugana who got up on the mountaintop and blew a shofar and said he's Mashiach and he's here, and the news was spreading like, wow, we heard Mashiach is here, Mashiach is here. So this rabbi opened his window and stuck his head out and with his, smelled with his nostril, and he goes, no, Mashiach's not here. So they explained that for him, he was already living himself in that utopian era. That's why he had to open the window and see if the world already received Mashiach. So we'll see. We'll find out when Mashiach comes. The point I'm making is, and we learn the Torah, and we're doing this right now. We're studying Maimonides, right? We have to understand it. We have to apply its messages. We have to live by its teachings. But within the Torah, there is the subset of teachings that is so deep, is so profound, that for most of Jewish history, it was actually believed that these teachings could only be appreciated by the great scholars whose minds were broad and who lived by a particular holy lifestyle. And especially given the complex and nuanced nature of these mystical Kabbalistic teachings, it was feared that they could easily misunderstand and misapply all of this information unintentionally, right? Leaving people confused and less enlightened. And this is why this part of the Torah, the esoteric teachings, Moshe Rabbeinu did not teach that part of the Torah to the masses, but only to a select few Jewish leaders according to the tradition. And it says in Pirkei Avos, Moshe kibel Torah misinai, that Moshe received the Torah, right? And Masar Yeshua taught it to Joshua. But if Moshe taught it to everyone, as the Gemara tells us, then why only mention Umasar Yeshua, that he gave it to Joshua? So the Medrash tells us that the Mishnah is referring to Moshe's teachings of the esoteric, the more hidden secrets. That did not teach to the masses. That he only taught, that he only revealed to Joshua. And that's why Joshua specifically mentioned there. This is something the Medrash says. But of course, we understand that these teachings were not initially recorded in writing, just as the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Halacha were all part of the oral tradition. The need for in-person training was of such importance that if it were all written, people would be tempted to study it on their own and inevitably misinterpret it. And the written word can easily be diffused. Right? It was feared that it could end up with certain individuals that it wouldn't be appropriately used. Maybe it would become more harmful than helpful. This is what Rambam himself says. So the result was that the esoteric teachings, the mystical aspects of Judaism were inaccessible to the average Jew. They were only accessible to the select few who were equipped with this level of study. That's why you may have heard why a person doesn't study Kabbalah until they're 40. Right? The study was always under a teacher. And this is why it's called Kabbalah. What does Kabbalah mean? Received tradition. But we know the Arizal, before the Arizal, who did we celebrate a few days ago? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is considered the author of the Zohar. He started to reveal this at some point after the temple's destruction. Many years later, there were other great mystical teachers, most famously the Arizal. But the Arizal lived 500 years ago. And he came from Spain to Tzfat in Israel and began teaching Kabbalah to a select group of scholars. And one of the things that made him unique was that he promoted the teachings of Kabbalah not just to those few select individuals, but rather he said it's a mitzvah to teach it, to disseminate the teachings outward. And he trained these great rabbis to teach others. These great teachings had the power to stir and nourish the Jewish soul, enabling the Jew to withstand and overcome the troubles, the trials, the tribulations, the difficulties of those times. And this was something, the reason why the Arizal chose to reveal it at that stage, even if that meant that some of the teachings would not be fully comprehended. The Arizal felt that that was maybe a price worth paying for the objective of strengthening Jews and Judaism. In fact, there was a metaphor shared that once there was a prince who was very ill, and doctors were called from all over the world to try to find the elixir, the medicine, what drug will help heal this young child. Until one doctor said, I found the solution, but one ingredient from my prescription is inaccessible. You cannot find it anywhere in the world. There's only one place we could find it. And the king, of course, was waiting, listening, tell me where? And the doctor said, it's in one of the jewels in your crown. We're going to have to take this jewel and grind it so finely, and I'll have to incorporate it, and when it's in a powder form, into the medicine. And only then can I give it to your son, to the prince. And he's not going to even fully absorb it because he's so ill. It's not going to go all into his mouth, and a lot of it will be wasted. But if just a little bit goes in, it will penetrate, it will seep in, and it will help cure the child's ailment. And the king agreed. And of course, when after the whole process of the pharmacy grinding this precious gem and then turning it into the medication, and now the medicine was pouring into the child and it's spilling all over, you would say, oh my gosh, you're wasting such an expensive, precious gem. So the Arizal said that even if it meant that some of these teachings, which is like the gem of Judaism, the deep mystical teachings of the Torah, even if they won't be fully comprehended, the Arizal felt that the price was worth paying, because if this would strengthen Jews and Judaism, if this would bring the healing to the prince, to the Jewish people, then it's worthwhile. And the Arizal observed a changing world. What was deemed to be abstract and not relatable in previous generations was slowly becoming relatable and understandable to the masses. And I think it's an important point of why the Kabbalah became that much more promulgated in recent years. And yes, it might get into the wrong hands, and Madonna's dealing with Kabbalah and thinks it's going to make her a bigger celebrity than she is. Zolzan. But that's why he felt that it's time for these hidden teachings. And later on came the Baal Shem Tov, who was born in the year Nachas, Tuf Nun Ches, 1698. And the Baal Shem Tov, when he was 36 in 1734, I gave you a whole lecture about that already long ago, he took extraordinary steps to ensure that Jewish mysticism, that these teachings of Kabbalah would penetrate the minds and hearts of all the Jews, and hence he came up with Hasidus. Because unlike the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov traveled the countryside. He visited thousands of Jews, men, women, young, old, simple, wise, everywhere they were. The Arizal stayed at his place in Tzfat in Israel. People came to him. He selected a few scholars to teach. The Baal Shem Tov went everywhere. And he called it the teachings of Chassidus, relatable Kabbalah. And he used metaphors and parables and short sayings and stories to help the uninitiated minds to grasp and to appreciate the nuanced teachings of Kabbalah, that he felt it's time for the world to get a taste of that future of, not the future, the deep mystical teachings, which will be revealed all the more so when Mashiach comes. Yeah?
How many Kabbalah teachers are there in the world? Some people about 12 at any one time.
I don't know. Don't know. But what he says is,
and who today are the Gedolim that teach Kabbalah? The Ketters,
I don't know. The Rebbe certainly made it very relatable. But the idea was that these are the teachings that the world will be filled with the knowledge of God when Mashiach comes, that we have the ability to process today, to understand these concepts in a much more accessible way than ever was before, right? And earlier generations didn't have this ability, whereas we have so much more of it today than ever before.
the world's progressed.
The world certainly has progressed.
How many more people are learning and studying and are more able to
Yes,
have a
no
grasp of
doubt.
some Kabbalah? I wouldn't say all, but
No doubt that today people have a lot more of a grasp of those teachings than ever before, for sure. And one more idea is that, when you use parables and metaphors and stories and ideas, it enables everybody to, even the simplest of people, to connect with these teachings, to understand and to appreciate godliness in their own terms. And that's why the Baal Shem Tov did exactly that. So maybe when it comes to deep, mystical, esoteric aspects of Kabbalah that it's difficult for people to understand. I don't know if the Baal Shem Tov went and disseminated that to the public as well, but the point was he certainly made it a lot more accessible than it ever was before. Yes, please, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, we are broadcast live. If I see your hand, I will get to you, but I can't that 1 second. I need you to understand, even though I'm broadcasting this to the whole world, we are a live audience, so for those watching online, please understand that this is a live interactive class, but for those of you who are present with me, and sometimes you want me to respond right away, I'm not ignoring you, but I need to conclude my thought. Otherwise, when you watch this video later on YouTube, it looks like a Oiska Hakta Haishina or something. You know what? Oiska Klapta. It's Kimtnish and the Gatenish. We used to have rules here, if you remember. The questions will be only once every 15 minutes. Okay? And it's not that I'm ignoring anyone. It is purely, I have to get a clear thought across. If I keep getting interrupted, so I see your hands, everyone, and I get to you when I'm able to. Okay, get out of here, you. Okay, yes. Yeah.
Just information. The 12 that you think that you're talking about, I think they're 13, and they are the hidden mystics, the pillars on which the...
That's 36.
36, sorry.
That's something else. It's called Lamed Vav Tzadikim. I'm not sure the source for it, but it's written somewhere. I don't know if it's in the Talmud. Could be. Where it says that there are 36 righteous people.
So
for whom...
These 36 people who know...
In Tzaddikim.
Well, it doesn't say Kabbalah. It just says 36 righteous people for which the world is enduring, that the world exists in their merit. So I don't know if that's connected to Kabbalah per se.
And the second thing is that if you want to meet Kabbalah in an easy-to-understand format, read Tanya.
True. So certainly Tanya makes it that much accessible as well, and Tanya gives you a lot of ideas and teachings from Kabbalah. Now, what was the result of all this? The result, of course, is the average Jew today is familiar with concepts of Jewish mysticism that just a few generations ago were only known to mystical scholars. And today, it's accessible to everyone, right? Jewish, call it esoterica, has truly become widely available. Like you say, Tanya, Chassidus, the deep mystical teachings are everywhere. Classes on Kabbalah abound. So much information is available in print. Go on the internet, but you have to still be careful because you never know what sources you're reading and if you're reading in the right places. But there's universal interest in these things, not just the Jews, many Gentiles who are very much interested in the inspiration from Kabbalah, its guidance for life, and it's certainly become something that everybody is reaching for and looking to understand. And there's no doubt there's a lot of misinterpretation of it and misused Kabbalistic teachings, but the overall result has certainly been tremendously positive. Now you said I shouldn't negate the negative. There's negative too, but let's look at the positive.
They've taken it from Judaism.
Yeah?
And they've taken our Kabbalah, they've taken our mysticism, incorporated into their so-called religion.
So tell me something.
And twisted it.
Are we not heading towards a day when the entire world is becoming better? Yes, I know we could see all the negative, all the problems, but it's a lot better too, right? And you know what? I'm reminded of a story I want to tell you. A story that happened about 100 years ago in New York City. And again, I think I'm going to miss telling you about Shavuos, but maybe we could do it tomorrow. So, the story happened about 100 years ago, and it's a beautiful story of a young Jewish lady, forgetting her name. I could Google it afterwards. And her husband, I think she lost her husband, and she's raising her one little child herself, little Maishele. And sadly, Maisha became desperately ill, severely ill. And she couldn't afford the doctor's bills. She was going places. Eventually, she was told by one particular, she went to the hospital with her child, and they checked, and they asked her if she could afford the bill, and she couldn't even afford it. They said there's one professor out there, one world-renowned physician. And this doctor, who happened to be in New York and practiced at a particular hospital, also happened to be Jewish, he's the only one who deals with this rare disease that her child has contracted. And if she could get that doctor, they referred her to her to come visit the child because the child was even too ill to come out. Somehow they got this doctor, and they told the doctor she'll pay, she said she'll pay the bill. When the doctor came to the house and realized she lives in a little dilapidated, what did they call those homes? What do they call those homes in Lower East Side of Manhattan in the turn of the previous century? There was a name for them. What was it? Chalupa. No, I'm talking about there was an actual name for these homes. Who knows? Pardon? Tenements. Tenement apartments. And when the doctor came to the tenement and saw what he's coming into, he goes, okay, this is a charity case. All right, he comes inside and he inspects the child, and he says, he knows the diagnosis of what this rare disease is. And although the child is in a high temperature, high fever, he said, listen, I won't charge you for my services, even though I usually take a lot of money for this. But you're going to need to get a certain medication, which is only available in a particular pharmacy on the Upper East Side, in Harlem, not a very safe neighborhood. And it costs $2,000 for the quantity of this prescription that you're going to need for your child. You're going to have to work out a way to pay for it, but you need to get that medicine quick. And this lady said, for sure. She quickly ran to her neighbor. She asked the neighbor to watch the baby, and she thanked the doctor profusely for the script. And she goes, she takes her purse, quickly hails a taxi, and she gets to the pharmacy, which is on the Upper Side of Manhattan. She pays for the taxi with her last few remaining dollars that she has. She goes into the pharmacy. She shows the pharmacist the script. Pharmacist says, listen, this is going to be very expensive. It's a $2,000 prescription. Do you have the money to pay for it? And this woman says, yes, I have the money. Just prepare it for me. And he's preparing the medicine, and he's about to give it to her and says, where's the cash? And she says, listen, sorry I made you prepare the medicine for me. She obviously knew how to manipulate him well enough to get the medicine prepared. She says, listen, I don't have it in cash. I need you to give it to me on credit. I promise I'll pay it. So what do you mean you promise you'll pay it? We don't give things here on credit. This is a lot of money, especially 1921, 22, $2,000, you know what that was? And she says, look, I'll do anything you want, anything you need. Give me a job. I'll work for you after hours. I have a job that pays my rent and my food. I don't have the money, but I'll pay you whatever it requires. And he says, look, you're in luck, lady. Our cleaning helper here just quit. We need somebody to come in a few hours a week to clean. And he does a calculation there. He sits there doing the maths. And he works out that if she comes in a few hours a day or a week, whatever it was, for the next year and a half, then it will equal the $2,000 that she owes for the medicine. And she says, okay, I'll do it. So write up a contract, I'll sign it right away. And so he does. He writes up a contract. She signs it, and he hands her a couple of bottles, little vials of the medicine. And with that bag of medicine for her child, she's off, and she's on her way back home. The problem is she doesn't even have money now for a taxi. She's running back from the uptown of Manhattan to downtown. She's running, and she's running through, as I told you before, a bad neighborhood. And before she knows it, she is being followed. And the quicker she runs, this fellow's bigger than her, and he catches up to her. And he's, what are you hiding there? She says, nothing, it's just, I have no money. No, I don't believe you, open your purse. And he spills out the purse, no money. What is this in this bag? And she says, it's medicine. Medicine, drugs, that's all that I need. Let me taste that medicine. And with that, he takes the medicine, and he tastes it, and he goes, disgusting. Where did you get this stuff from? And he's angry. He doesn't like the taste of this drug. It's not what he's looking for. And he's so mad at her, he starts pouring out the medicine. He sprays it on her because he's so angry that he didn't get what he wanted, and he beats her to the ground. This woman, as you can see, does anything for her child, and she believes in God, and she's going to do anything it takes to have her child get better. She lifts herself up without the medication now, with his medicine on her face, and the face is now getting swollen to some chemical reaction that she's experiencing from the medicine on her skin, and she makes her way back to the pharmacy. She comes in, the pharmacist says, what are you doing back here? We're about to close. And she says, listen, I got to tell you, something happened on the way. I lost the medicine. Please write up another contract. I'll work another year and a half. You have me for the next 3 years. I'll sign on the dotted line. And she says, no, I can't do this. How could you do that? And in the meantime, she says, please, I beg you need to help me save my child. I'll sign it. He writes up another contract. In the meantime, he's preparing the medicine. We got to close our doors. And he looks at her, why is your face so swollen? What happened? And she starts giving him the details, the information of what happened. And he says, your face swollen from that medication? Something doesn't make sense. And he looks at what medicine, looks at the bottle, what he gave her, what he prepared before, and he can't believe himself. He gave her the wrong composition. And he says, there's an angel protecting your child. There's an angel protecting a child. Had you given your child what I had prepared, the kid would be dead. The kid would be dead. There's an angel protecting your child. He took back the contracts. He shredded them into the garbage. He said, please don't tell anybody that I messed up like this. I can't believe all my years practicing as a pharmacist for 40 years. I've never done such a thing. Please don't let the word spread. I will give you the proper medicine for free. And she says, please make sure it's the right medication this time. Indeed it was. And he gave her $100, she said, and hailed a taxi for her to go home. And when she came home, slowly but surely, she nurtured her child back to good health. She weaned him back. And this child turned out to be a great rabbi who was the head of the Agudas Yisrael, the Rabbinical Council of America. And his name was Rabbi Moshe Scherer. Anyone of you heard of Rabbi Moshe Scherer? I could put a picture for you here for a moment of who he was. Great rabbinic personality. Passed away in the late 90s. He didn't live, he lived only into his 70s. I think he passed away in 98. So he lived, 76 years. So he was a great rabbi, and whenever tough decisions had to be made, he said, in life, I never despair, because my mother never gave up on me. She believed in Hashem, she trusted in Hashem, she did everything she can to save her child. This story just came to my mind just thinking that this is why the Arizal, and following him the Baal Shem Tov, and after him many great Hasidic Rebbes, why did they teach these deep teachings? Because the world is getting closer to Mashiach. We're at the footsteps. We hear the footsteps. We're at the heels. We're right there. And so when we study this portion of Torah, which I will read to you one more part of it before we conclude, is that we have to rejoice and celebrate in these teachings, even if we don't fully comprehend them and understand them, because this is the teachings of the Torah. And so, yes, we do this in Simchas Torah. We celebrate the completion of the cycle of studying Torah. When we finish reading the final verses of the Torah, this Shabbos in Shul, we are going to conclude the reading of the book of Vayikra. What are we going to say? Chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. We give each other encouragement and strength. We remember the past, we live the present, we trust the future. We say it 3 times because we realize that this is what sustains us. It is the teachings of the Torah. It's living by the Torah. And so for Rambam to conclude with the teachings of the future era, it's a taste for us to know what's to come. Let me read to you something from the Torah. He says it's appropriate to rejoice when we complete the Torah, and it's customary to immediately begin again from the very beginning of the Torah, which is what we do on Simchas Torah. We finish reading the book of Devarim, we go straight back to Bereshis. Devarim ends with a lamed, the word Yisrael, and Bereshis starts with the letter Beis. What does that give us? The word Lev, that's the heart of the Jewish people, the Torah. Right when we conclude, we start again. And as the Torah says, this prevents the prosecuting angel from alleging that we are finished with the Torah and do not want to study it anymore. So as Rosalind asked yesterday, I don't see Rosalind on the group today. I don't know what happened to her. Rosalind said, what, you do it again? Yes, we do it again. It's not a one-time done. When you finish the Shas, Daf Yomi, start again. When you finish the Torah, you start again. When we finish the book of Vayikra this Shabbos, right away at Mincha, we go on to Bamidbar. Absolutely. There's an Israeli expression. You know how it goes? Hayat tov, v'tov shehaya. What does that mean, Ronnie?
It was good. It was good that it was.
There you go. It was good, and it's good that it was. Hayat tov, v'tov shehaya. And this, of course, conveys the feelings that we so often have after a particular experience. When we're happy we did something, but we are just as happy to move on. Yeah, tov shaya, hayatov tov shaya. But when it comes to the study of Torah, that's not our attitude. When it comes to the study of Torah, Torah is compared to a song, right? Don't we say that in Ha'azinu Hashamayim? The Torah is compared to a song. We love to sing our favorite songs repeatedly, and instead of boring us, they inspire us. This fly. So when we complete the Torah, you know what? I hate fundraising. It's part of my worst. It's my F word that I don't enjoy. But I had a good friend whose yard site's coming up, Herbie Rosenberg, alav hashalom. He used to say to me, Rabbi, I don't understand why you don't like fundraising. First of all, it starts off with fun. And it ends off with sing. So you like to sing and you like to have fun. So what's wrong with fundraising? I think it's the ray in the middle that I struggle with. So when we complete the Torah, we start again, just like our song. This is the song that never ends. It just goes on and on, my friends. We want to show that the Torah is an important, vital element of our lives. And we'll continue to study it in order to gain deeper insights. And so we move on to the next cycle. And you'll study it and know it better and deeper. And that's the idea of why we study Rambam. Immediately, we begin the new cycle of studying the Rambam. So what are we going to do right now, my friends? We're going to go right into the very beginning, the first chapter of Rambam, where he starts as follows in his introduction, in the laws of the foundations of the Torah. He says, Amud HaMudim, the foundation of all foundations. The pillar of wisdom is to know that there is a primary being who brings all of existence into being. All the beings of the heavens, the earth, and what is between them came into existence only from the truth of this being. Rama begins his work by talking about the most important mitzvah, the ultimate foundation to all of Judaism, knowing about the existence of God who created everything. In the words, the foundation of all foundations, the inside, he says, Yesoid ha-yesoides, ve'amod ha-chachmos, the pillar of wisdom, is it's the very first letter of these words. What does it spell? Let me put it on the screen for you. Foundation of all foundations and the pillar of wisdom. Let's put it up. What does it spell for you? The first letter of each of these words. There you go. It's God's name. Absolutely. So Rambam begins his work by making reference to Hashem, which is similar to the custom that we have, like we write at the beginning of a page, Beis Hey. What is BH or BSD? Ever see that on top of a page people write? Beis Samach Dalet or BH, which is Baruch Hashem or B'siyata D'Shmaya, with the help of God. Or inside a book people write Lamed Hey Vav, which is La Hashem Haaretz Mlaya, that to God is the entire world. So that is the way Rambam starts off. Another interesting point is how Rambam describes creation here in the present tense. Look at his words. Who brings into all of existence into being. Notice that? Why is he speaking in the present tense? Didn't God create the world 5,782 years ago? It's a basic concept of Judaism, that God did not create the world once and then disappear, walk away. God's act of creation is constant. It's an ongoing process. God renews the act of creation each second. We said it in the davening this morning. It's a constant act that's ongoing. So this serves to underscore the very idea that every second is unique. Every moment is precious. It's imbued with distinctive potential and meaning. You are you are indispensable to God's plan for this world, and every moment is so uniquely precious. I hope you also noticed that Rambam does not talk about the need to believe in God, but what does he say? Look at his words. To know that there's a primary being who brings all of existence into being. Right? Faith is a great first step. But Rambam is teaching us here that we need to attempt to comprehend the articles of faith that have been passed down to us, to try to understand them and appreciate them with our minds. You know the story about, I think it was Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, I'm not certain who it was, but he came from a Hasidically challenged background. His father-in-law, who was supporting him and he lived with him, didn't like the Hasidic movement. And when his son-in-law went to study Hasidus, he says, what did you go there for? What did you learn? You spend all this time there. He said, I learned that God exists. He says, nonsense. Everybody knows God exists. And he calls over the maid, who was a peasant woman, a regular Polish, Russian, whatever she was, not Jewish, illiterate, ignorant. You believe in God, he asks her. What do you mean? Of course. She pulls out her cross necklace. Of course. She carries it everywhere. She believes in God. You see, she says, he says to his son-in-law, even she, who's not Jewish, who hasn't the same education, what do you have to go to this Hasidic rabbi to learn? Everybody believes in God, not just Jews. You're telling me you went to a rabbi to learn to believe in God? She says, no. She says it. I now know it. This is what Rambam's saying. It's not enough to believe. Faith is not enough in Judaism. We also have to know it. And when we know it, when we make it part of our entire being, we imbue ourselves with we permeate our minds, we saturate ourselves with this knowledge. Then our relationship with God becomes more firm within us and more integrated with our personality. And that's what Rambam is telling us, what you ought to know, not just to believe. Ani Ma'amin is later on as well, but that's the end where he talks about it. Pardon? Absolutely. Yeah. Of course. So this is just recapping this point, okay, that we want to comprehend, not just to believe. Okay, we'll go with one more or two more points before we conclude. Okay, right here. The first mitzvah, he says, is that we are commanded about the belief in God, to believe that he is the original cause and source of existence, who brings all creations into being. Okay, now notice here, there's something, one way of understanding this is that Rambam evolved on this issue, right? First defining the mitzvah as belief, when he writes in the Sefer HaMitzvot, but later he says that belief is insufficient, and the mitzvah is to comprehend God's existence. So he has both ideas. But there might be another way of understanding this. All of Rambam's works, with the exception of Mishnah Torah, were written in Judeo-Arabic, and they were only later translated in Hebrew. The only book that he wrote in actual Hebrew was Mishnah Torah. So when we say that Sefer HaMitzvot has the word believe, we mean that this is how it appears in the Hebrew translation from the Arabic. In 1914, Rabbi Chaim Heller printed a new edition of Sefer HaMitzvot in which he compared different Hebrew translations against a manuscript in the original Judeo-Arabic. And he points out that the Arabic word used by Rambam when spelled out in Hebrew, which is how Judeo-Arabic is written, is, I don't even know how you pronounce this word, e'atadad, which can mean to know or can mean to believe. So he says it's a double meaning. So it could be that the same word, which means to know, means to believe. Meaning your belief should become to a knowledge that you know it, that becomes firm in your life. Etadad. Something like that. I don't know how to... It's spelled Aleph, Ayin, Taf, Dalid, Aleph, Dalid. Etadad. It can mean to believe. Here, I'll put it back on the board. It can mean to believe. It could also mean to know. So maybe the idea is that the very word to believe, that your belief has to become ingrained in you, that you know it. Okay. All right. Ladies and gents, when you say the word it means you're a loss of words. We have to conclude here. We have to get into Shavuos. Okay, so just on this note, just looking at the belief and knowing, we have to understand that there has to be a way of knowing. How do you know something? You investigate to the best of your knowledge, to the best that you can study. But as Rambam himself points out later on in his book, that you have to then, where knowledge ends, because there's a limit to what you'll know. There's always a limit. That's where belief kicks in. So maybe the word knowledge and belief are both inextricably connected to each other. That you have to know means you have to study. But once you've, studied all that you can, believe. Okay? Because we're talking here not just about, what are you getting to know? An infinite God? That's unknowable. Right? There will always be something about Hashem and about God's ways that remain mysterious to us, that will be beyond our comprehension. Which is why faith will always be a crucial part of this mitzvah. Why you can't just know. He's telling you no, so it becomes real and part of your life. But then, you have to believe. You have to make faith an important part of it as well. So, let's go back to the beginning of Mishnah Torah. Here it is, he talks about knowing God. And interestingly, Rambam uses the same language in the ending of his great work. When he says that when Mashiach comes, the whole world will be filled with Umala haaretz Deya es Hashem. The whole world will be filled with, what's Deya? To know God. And this way, the beginning of Mishnah Torah and the end are very much linked to each other. And so, we just looked at the first halakha and the very last. And we have experienced the taste of Mishnah Torah. Hopefully, it's a good appetizer that leaves us hungry for more, which is a reason to join the learning cycle. And the merits of learning together, of learning every day, is going to stand us by. I don't have to elucidate, I don't have to elaborate to you on the benefits of learning every day. Of course, the challenge is how. So what do? Come here, right? Come here and learn with me. And besides for that, there's many great books you could get from our library. And on the internet today, there's so many great websites, including our own, ChabadSouthAfrica.org. And there are many videos available and audio classes. Like I said yesterday, there's an app. There's so much information. You could do 1 chapter a day. You could do 3 chapters a day. There's so many ways you could do this. So certainly you should seize the opportunity. And I just want to conclude with a thought that I mentioned on the Siyam Rambam Zoom the other night, which was that the Hebrew word for disease, machala, is, there's 83 different topics in the book of Mishnah Torah. 83 different topics. And 83 is the numerical value of the word machala, illness. So by learning Torah in general, and Mishnah Torah in particular, what happens is we will be blessed with the divine healing. And this becomes an even greater motivator to engage us in the study cycle of Rambam. So, as we said here, the idea is to investigate as best we can in order to understand about God as much as possible. And because we are discussing the infinite, unknowable God, there will always be something that we don't understand, and therefore faith will be necessary to kick in. So, therefore, take the opportunity, learn, whether it's with our books, your books, online, or wherever you need to. There's so much available. There's so much to learn, whether it's 1 chapter a day, or 3 chapters a day, or just the Sefer HaMitzvahs. There's no doubt plenty you could do, and this will bring healing, as the world needs lots of healing. Will usher in a time, as we quoted before from Rambam, when there will be no more famine, and no more war, no more envy, no more rivalry, because what's good will flow in abundance. Shkoyach, everyone. Please come back for more.